Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at Detective City of Angels by Ryder Games. Detective is a deduction game for 1 to 5 players. Up to 4 of those players will take on the role of sleazy 1920s LA detectives with a less than savoury approach to policing, while 1 player will take on the role of the villainous and deceptive Chisel, who is essentially a games master type role, attempting to mislead and confuse the detectives in order to win. Before we go any further, yes, this game can be played solo, but it involves a choose-your-own-adventure style book. It's still fun, but when I played the solo game, I treated it like a training mode, letting me learn the mystery of a crime case for myself while getting a feel for how to best mislead the detectives when I play as the Chisel. This is one of those games where, as the owner, you will inevitably take on the role of the one in the one versus many formula. The solo mode can be fun, but the best way to play this game is with at least 2 detectives and the Chisel. It's a game where the higher the player count, the more fun the gameplay, as turns are quite quick and the detectives should really be paying attention to each other's turns if they want to get ahead, so downtime between turns is a non-issue here. Based on that, I can say right up front, if you do not have at least 2 friends who want to play this game, then it's not worth getting. That's enough of the solo talk. Let's get on with what this game is all about, screwing over your fellow detectives to get the glory of solving the case. Each detective player receives a miniature, pick whichever you like, they all function identically, a player board and a number of wooden and plastic tokens. These wooden cubes are used to track your actions. These ovals are used to track which evidence cards you have uncovered, and the hats can be placed on your miniature, but their actual purpose is to track which suspects you have leverage over. More on leverage later. The tokens and player board are colour-coded, and your miniature should be clipped into one of these matching coloured bases. Sat on the other side of the board is the Chisel, who will need to collect all of the cards and tokens found in the tuck box of the case being played. The Chisel will also receive 2 of the plastic hat tokens from each player's supply, as it is not just the detectives who can use leverage. The Chisel lays out all of the cards face down along the track at the top of the board with the matching letter, so card A goes in space A, card B goes in space B, and so on and so forth. The Chisel then sets the timer token based on the number of detectives playing. The Chisel also collects the suspect standees and places them to one side along with these square answer cards. These answer cards must be kept hidden from the detectives lest you give the game away to any sharp-eyed sleuths. I recommend taking the answer envelope shown here and placing it on top of the deck of answer cards. Finally, the Chisel takes the deck of search cards and places them face down nearby. That's the basic setup of a case. Everything else is handled in the case briefing, so let's take a look at the briefing to the first case. It is impossible to go any further in this review without spoiling the setup, so consider yourself warned. The Chisel reads through the case briefing, which I suggest doing in your best 1920s hard-boiled police chief with no time for flim-flam, you mooks voice. Otherwise, what's the point in even playing this game? As the Chisel reads through the case, it will instruct them to reveal some of the case cards, usually the victim and a few persons of interest, as well as perhaps the murder weapon. In addition to revealing the evidence cards mentioned, the Chisel will place any suspect standees and the crime scene marker at the locations indicated. Once all that is done, it is time to start detecting. Player order begins from the Chisel's left, and each detective receives scratch, or money, based on their position in the activation order, where the first player receives the least scratch and the last player receives the most. Scratch has a few uses that we will cover as we go, but for now, let's take a look at this absolutely beautiful board depicting 1920s Los Angeles. On your turn, you will pick one of these blue spaces. These represent the various police precincts around the city. You may pick any of them as your starting location, but you only do this on your turn, so your detective does not start the game on the board. Once you are on the board, you have several actions available to you. These are move, search, question, analyse and kickback. Let's take a look at moving first. When you spend an action to move, you simply move your detective from one of these numbered spaces to another. However, there is a limitation to this. If we look at the board, we can see it is divided up into districts. Each district has a coloured border that distinguishes it from the others. When you perform a move action, you cannot cross into different districts unless you are on a border space. The spaces along the borders count as being in any district where the bordering line touches the space, so this space counts as being in both of these districts. So to move from one district to another, you must first move to a border space, and then spend another action to move to your desired space in the new district. Searching. There are two types of searching: search location and search suspect. Regardless of which you do, the chisel will find the matching search card and hand it to you face down. Once you have read it, the card will inform you of any effect, such as looking at a piece of evidence or revealing an important fact about the case. Analyze is a very simple action. You gain 1 scratch, that's it. Kickback is an action you can only do at one of these orange spaces. These represent mob haunts. When you go to one of these places and use the kickback action, you will receive scratch equal to the number of players in the game. This thematically represents your detective taking a kickback from the mob to overlook their criminal affairs. Finally, we will look at the most important action of the game, questioning suspects, which you can only do if you are in a space with a suspect. Questioning is the meat of the game, and what will ultimately lead you to the solution. To question a suspect, first look at your evidence sheet. The evidence sheet, as you can see, has this matrix printed on it, where down the side you have a list of numbered suspects. Along the top are spaces for you to write down any evidence you have uncovered. Now, to question a suspect, you tell the chisel who you are questioning and about what evidence. Essentially, you will be saying to the chisel something like, "I want to question suspect 2 about evidence D." The chisel will then hand you an answer envelope, where you, and only you, can read the response given by the suspect. Meanwhile, the other detectives will be placing one of these snitch tokens in front of them, which when revealed will be either a bribe or a pass. Now that you have the answer, you must decide whether to accept the answer or press the suspect. If you think the suspect knows more than they are letting on, you can press them. To do this, hand the chisel one of your hats. If the suspect is holding back, the chisel must now give you the best possible answer that suspect has on the chosen evidence. In addition, your hat will be placed on the suspect card, and you now have leverage over them in the future, allowing you to spend that leverage and receive the best answer from the suspect without having to press them. If, however, you pressed the suspect and the chisel had already given you the best possible answer, then the chisel keeps your hat, and as everyone knows, a detective without his hat is no detective at all. For the chisel, the hat, or leverage tokens, can be spent to block a question from the detective of the matching colour. This means that detective cannot ask that question for the rest of the turn. They can still ask other questions, but not the one the chisel has blocked. This means a cunning chisel can play psychological games, such as blocking an irrelevant question, making the detectives think it is important and they are missing something crucial. However, detectives can pay 2 scratch to have a local goon work the suspect over and force the chisel to give an answer. Now, remember those snitch tokens we mentioned earlier? These snitches allow other detectives to gain access to the information you just received. After you have received your final answer, so after pressing the suspect or using leverage and receiving the final answer card from the chisel, all the other detectives will reveal their snitch tokens. If it is a pass, they don't get any information. But if it says bribe, that detective must pay 3 scratch and then gets to read the answer card. Remember, this is done after the questioning detective has pressed or settled for the answer, which means they may be gaining access to a deceptive piece of information if the chisel has successfully deceived the questioning detective. Questioning is the most in-depth and most important action that you will be doing the most of. Before we move on, let's have a quick look at the chisel side of the table. When a question is asked, the chisel looks at the answers matrix in the chisel book. This contains all the possible answers for each suspect. Simply find the suspect being questioned and the evidence being asked about. Then, find the box in the matrix where the two meet. You will find one answer in red, which indicates it is the best possible answer. The answers in black are misleading or less useful. Once you have picked your answer that you want to give, you find the matching answer card for the suspect and place it in the answer envelope, so only that answer is visible in the viewing window. Then hand it to the detective. If they press successfully, you will have to swap the answer given to match the one written in red. As the chisel, it is your job to know when it is best to mislead the detectives or toss them a breadcrumb to follow, all in the service of getting the gumshoes to follow different leads and end up chasing their tails. That's the basics of how detective works. Now let's take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good. Well, the game is fast-paced and pretty simple to play. If you like deduction games, I'd say this one is a pretty darn good one. I really don't have much else to say. Good components, gorgeous artwork, Good simple rules, some fun and challenging cases, all wrapped up in a 1920s noir theme. What's not to like? And as a big final positive, I'd say it's actually as much fun being the chisel as it is a detective. The bad. The only bad thing in this game is replayability. Once you have played through a case, that's it. If you are the chisel, which let's face it, as the game owner you probably will be, then to replay any of these cases you will need to find a new group of players who haven't played before. If the detectives fail, you can extend the replayability a bit by not reading the conclusion and letting them try again. The ugly. Almost all of the cases are constructed to have a twist in the tale that keeps detectives guessing. This is necessary, but sometimes the twists are elaborate and counterintuitive to keep the detectives on the back foot. Each suspect has to have some plausibility as the guilty party, and so sometimes a case feels a bit like Murder on the Orient Express, where everyone has their own preposterous reasons for murdering the victim. But that's it really. The game doesn't have many messy parts, although I suppose it's fair to say there is a lot of pressure on the chisel not to mess up with the answers and risk ruining the whole game. So overall, I really like this game. It's a lot of fun, and I wish there were even more cases for it. There is not a moment in this game where I find myself bored. From watching the detectives bicker over the few crumbs they each have, to seeing them take the bait of a false lead and spend 3 turns running around the board looking for something that doesn't exist. Maybe it appeals to my darker side as the chisel, but this game is not boring at all. Anyway, I'm bored of reviewing this game now. Bye.